G'day, Justin Hogg here from Right Source. We're talking not-for-profits and bookkeeping for not-for-profits, how that's different from normal bookkeeping. I know this is an exciting one. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's get into it. Before I get into what's different, let's just talk about why I want to talk about this. And that's when you're a not-for-profit and you're looking for a bookkeeper, whether it be in-house or an outsourced provider, either way, you want to make sure that they've got the skills that are required to meet the needs of your organization. So this is why I suppose this video is important, to understand those peculiar things for not-for-profit that may not necessarily be something a normal bookkeeper is used to dealing with. So let's dive in. First thing that a bookkeeper will need to deal with in a not-for-profit that is unique to not-for-profit space is how you deal with grants. Now, grants are a little different in the not-for-profit space compared to some of the commercial stuff, in terms of you need to be able to acquit the grants, which is again similar to your commercial grants, but these grants can quite often be going for a longer period of time. So you need to be able to record that information in terms of the costs correctly and be able to report back on it to understand where things are at with the grant, because a not-for-profit's going to need to manage where things are at and know if they're under or overspending on that grant. The other thing then, from a grant perspective, is also the income side of things. So because these are often large grants and longer periods of time, is how you recognize the income side of the grants can be a little more tricky in not-for-profit, because it can often depend on the grant structure, the timing, the agreements, what's happened previously, and all those aspects feed into how you actually recognize your income or revenue that's coming off the grant in the account. The next thing that your bookkeeper needs to have an appreciation of and potentially a knowledge of is salary packaging and FBT, because not-for-profits have an FBT concession, which means that effectively they're able to pay their employees in kind or in a different way, which would normally be subject to FBT and other commercial businesses, but because of this concession, they can do things like pay for employees' rent, which would, if a normal organization was to do that, would attract FBT. If it's done in a certain way for not-for-profits, which is completely legitimate and there are legislation in place to allow this to happen, the not-for-profit doesn't have to pay FBT. Now, these things were put in place to assist not-for-profits in attracting quality employees without having to necessarily pay the full commercial rate. Having an understanding of how that FBT concession works, how it interplays with salary packaging, and then making sure that the processes are put in place to ensure that it's taken full advantage of for the employee and the employer's point of view, but also that it's not done incorrectly, because with anything done with salary, if you do it incorrectly, it can have an impact on both the employee and the employer. So an appreciation and an understanding of FBT and salary packaging is something that a bookkeeper needs when they're dealing in the not-for-profit space. The next thing they need to understand is they need to have a good understanding of GST. Now, I would say all bookkeepers have a good understanding of GST, but GST as it can apply to not-for-profits, because again, with not-for-profits, there's a number of concessions in terms of GST that can be taken advantage of in terms of how your not-for-profit runs. So how you manage fundraising events, how also you deal with GST that relates to grants, donations, or sponsorship, and how that is differently accounted for and reported in your accounts. Also, if you've got operations that aren't running at a commercially viable rate, there are some concessions there for GST as well, depending on the percentages and how you put that all together. So having an appreciation of those things in terms of the GST space and how they affect the operations of the organization and how things need to be accounted for in the books can be very important and can help, again, the not-for-profit operate efficiently and make the most of the funds that have available to them. The last thing a bookkeeper needs to be able to have an appreciation of when dealing with a not-for-profit is the number of different stakeholders that require reporting from the not-for-profit and how that reporting can be different. So, for example, a not-for-profit often has a board and they will want reporting in a certain way to them at a certain frequency. So whether they have a monthly report and they want a certain format and see certain things, they'll want that distributed to them. Similarly, a not-for-profit will also have to do financial reporting. That may not be done in the same way as the board reporting. There are different interpretations and different ways you need to compile it. Being able to create your base data that the bookkeeper is putting together that allows you to report one way for the board and potentially another way for your financial statements is important. They'll also potentially need to be able to report back to large donors or sponsors in terms of where the funds have gone, how they've been utilized. So being able to maintain your books in a way that allows these things to be reported on differently, but still maintain that transparency is definitely a skill set that is unique to the not-for-profit space and something you should consider when you're looking for your bookkeeper, whether they've got those skills. So that's a little bit of an insight in terms of some specific areas that a bookkeeper needs to be across when you're looking to hire someone to be your bookkeeper in the not-for-profit space. And also, if you're a bookkeeper that's looking to get into the not-for-profit space, there are things that you should look to, get yourself up to speed of, because that can help you provide a better service. If you enjoyed this video, definitely feel free to subscribe or check out the other videos we've got on YouTube. There's a number there for the not-for-profit space, and that's an area that we work quite closely in. If you have any questions about bookkeeping or the not-for-profit space generally, definitely feel free to chuck them in the messages down below, or look me up on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I'm always happy to help anyone who's working in the not-for-profit space, because it's all about achieving your purpose. Again, thanks for watching. It's been Justin Hogg from RightSource.